group here. It's called The Wayward Mind, and it deals with connections between the brain and almost anything else you can think of under the sun. And so when the topic for today of connection between neuroscience and beauty came up, it seemed like a natural fit. The driving force behind this group has been Larry Gendro, whom many of you know, and he obviously would be the person who should be up here speaking today. But he and Marilyn have just gotten back from Hawaii, where they go every summer in order for Larry to play golf, hurt his foot, and spend time in the hospital. So Larry suggested me as a member of the group, and my reaction to the beauty and brain connection is, I don't know. We've had readings on almost every subject under the sun that you can think of between connecting the brain to something, and I can't remember any of them talking about brain-body, mind, beauty connection. And so I'm very much looking forward to what's being discussed today. I do know that in my life, my strongest reactions to beauty have tended to coincide most intensely with what I've heard described as religious experience or spiritual experience. Now, I'm unsure also about what the heck a religious experience or a spiritual experience is. I've talked to many people who say they've had them. I don't know that I've ever had them. But I do know that the times that I've been exposed to what I regard as beauty, my reaction has been most intense in feeling a connection to what felt like something larger, bigger than just my ordinary everyday experience. Sometimes these reactions have been to hearing things, they've been auditory. I can remember vividly my first experiences listening to Bach's St. Matthew Passion or the Mozart Clarinet Concerto or Grieg's Piano Concerto. Sometimes these reactions have been to visual stimuli, either natural stimuli like seeing Bernie Falls for the first time, or the jaw-dropping experience of standing on the rim of the Grand Canyon for the first time and looking out over those miles and miles of beauty. Sometimes the reactions have been to man-made things, like seeing the actual Van Gogh's sunflowers the first time, rather than just photographs of it, or standing in a European cathedral for the first time, or looking at the pictures on our walls, the magnificent photography of Lloyd and his gift to this congregation. Each of these experiences of beauty and a few more, I can record it, I can recall in detail what I was doing, where I was, when it was happening. And all of this detail is filtered through and stored in my brain. All of this experience seemed both inside and outside my mind at the same time. Behind my eyes and between my ears, I was experiencing what I can only call the excitement of a spiritual experience and an experience of beauty.
Thank you, Gary. Today's reading feels like it was written to me, and I think some of you also may appreciate this as well. Today's Approaching Conflict Like a Poem by Tina Marquez, September 13th, 2023. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of the creative alternatives for responding to conflict. Dorothy Thompson. I joined a poetry class because a new acquaintance invited me to. I mostly joined so I could get to know this person better. I was captivated by the first day by the deep wisdom my professor shared. To me, it was like being at church. Every word he spoke found fertile soil in my heart. There were times I felt myself overcome with beauty. The beauty I found in this class contrasted with the conflicts I was witnessing at work, in society, and almost everywhere. One Friday, as I listened to my teacher recite one of our poems, I wondered, what if I approach conflict like writing a poem? What if everybody did? Most of the time, conflict is reactive. People tend to do and say things before they've had a chance to process their emotions, to understand the totality of the conflict. But I learned in my poetry class about carefully choosing words, not because they needed to rhyme or have a specific number of syllables, but because they needed to be precise and meaningful. Poets are intentional about how to best deliver the message, how to best uncover the mystery of life so that others can experience it. Silence matters, too. Part of the message is to pause, to wait, to leave space, to breathe before the next line. There's also a rhythm. A poem is a song, and songs can touch on difficult subjects too. But the rhythm, the melody matters. Since that moment, I've been wondering, what if the next time I find myself in the midst of conflict, I slow down and imagine that I'm about to write a poem? Then conflict, resolution, or transformation would turn into a craft, a laboratory where beauty is created. There would be a slowing down that would help me connect with what I'm feeling so I can find the right words to share the experience, and a silence to let me listen to the poem of the other.
They asked if I wanted the step, and I said no, and then I tried it, and I say yes. The beauty is we can change our mind. So, beloveds, today is the last Sunday in our month to reflect on beauty, and it prompted me to ask, why does beauty matter? Considering our other reflections on beauty, I wanted to close this conversation with how beauty changes us, how it impacts how we interact with the world, and why it is so important. Now, I am not talking about commercialized extractive beauty that makes billions of dollars a year. That is not what we're talking about here. Resisting that message is a message for another day. I'm talking about the soul-touching, connecting beauty that connects us to each other and the larger world. The type of interconnectedness that helps us define ourselves with the support of beautiful, beloved communities, right here. I also told the search committee that I'm a scientist, and science is fundamental to my theology. And I mentioned last week that for me, theology is what really matters. So I invite you to consider that in this beloved community, what really matters about beauty. Today, we have seen Louis Strasberg's video with the powerful words of the Benedictine monk, Brother David Rast, which I find both breathtaking and breath-giving. We have heard how the experience of participating in the Wayward Minds group has been beautiful for Gary, and some really powerful reflections. Thank you, Gary. We have sang together both the connections to the earth and to build our dreams. Thank you, choir. I also will offer some images that I think are beautiful and really exciting. We'll see if you agree. So let's start with how beauty changes us. Looking toward the sources of direct experience, as Gary named, those moments where we feel that, wow, that moment of something truly gorgeous. Have we felt those moments? Okay. I have. And I invite you to call them to mind if you have also. So for me, those are memorable moments of connection that make me pause. They invite me to be fully present in that moment and deeply connect to that experience, visual, audio, however it's coming. Feeling Beauty by G. Gabriel Starr has the subtitle of The Neuroscience of the Aesthetic Experience. And it describes the neurological experience of beauty in the language and the images of the brain. She shows how the experience of beauty through the sister arts of music, painting, and poetry affect the brain, centering Alexander Baumgartner's 1735 definition of the aesthetic experience. The experience of beauty is a blend of sensation and knowledge, such that we may almost feel thought itself. I love that. Some beautiful moments I have felt like that for me, where I can almost feel the thought. And others have felt more embodied and somehow deeper and broader at the same time. And when we consider our seventh principle, I'm sorry, Angela, can you get some water? The sacred circle of life and the living harmony of the rhythms of nature, I find many moments where I feel beauty. One such moment was when I first saw and heard Louis Strasberg's video. And as he offered in his associated TED Talk, beauty and seduction are nature's tools for survival because we protect what we fall in love with. It opens our hearts and makes us realize that we are a part of nature and not separate from it. I think that's a spiritual moment of beauty. Let's contrast that to how much our society drives us towards individualism, separateness, and isolation. It is beautiful to be reminded of our deep connection and interconnection. The beauty of the interdependent web is a healing, life-giving experience that reminds us how connected we are to the earth, to the forest, to the air, and the water we breathe, and the water we drink. At the intersection of how beauty changes us and how we interact with the world is our brain on art. What happens in our brains when we experience beauty? For thousands of years, people have thought about this and tried to describe it. And modern science offers another view after the decade of the brain in the 1990s. Experiments have shown various neural networks or patterns within the brain that are associated with emotions, activity, and rest. The default mode network is the parts or pattern of our brain that activates during wakeful rest, which are our self-related processes. That can be a nap, mindfulness, a meditation practice. It may be just letting our minds wander while we fold laundry, walk the dog, or any other repetitive, mostly mindless task. Have we had those experiences? Right? When we have those experiences, our default mode network is lit up. Consistently, reduced levels of activity happen when we go to do something, right? So our default mode network kind of embodies the don't just do something, be there, right? This image of the brain, there you go, is a functional magnetic resonance image. And this is the one that I think is beautiful, that we'll see if you do. When someone is looking at art. It's from the article, The Brain on Art. Intense aesthetic experience activates the default mode network. So why does this matter? Interacting with art is doing something. The activity of this network would be expected to decrease in this intentional activity. However, in appreciating beauty, the activity of the network actually increases. Carla Schatz, in a separate article for Scientific American, coined the phrase, cells that fire together wire together. We may have heard that, right? And as these areas fire, they become more connected with the experience of a beautiful object and our inner self. Having this happen when exposed to art suggests a building or a deepening of the connections between us and the outside world. We can go to this line. G. Gabriel Starr suggested that this deepens our emotional connection to what we find beautiful and shifts how we value it. Or, returning to Louis Strasberg's words, beauty and seduction are nature's tools for survival because we protect what we fall in love with in the dancing of those flowers, right? It opens our hearts and it makes us realize we are part of nature and not separate from it. Beloveds, beauty changes us. Beauty matters because it impacts how we interact with the world. Dr. Daniel Siegel, professor of UCLA, explored the relationship between the mind and the brain. His work is so rich and complex. I will only be able to discuss a small part of it here. Dr. Siegel assembled over 40 scientists from various fields. Neurologists knew the neural networks, psychologists and sociologists, I know we have a few in our community, they knew how we are formed in relationship with each other. And we just did our joys and sorrows, right? The mathematicians know that complex systems can have emergence, where the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and self-organization is possible in an emergent process. I think what I find most amazing is he got this disparate group of scientists to agree on anything. And yet, the collection of these thought leaders led to a beautiful definition of the mind as an emergent, self-organizing, embodied, relational process that regulates the flow of energy and information. Isn't that beautiful? An emergent, embodied, self-organizing relational process that regulates the flow of energy and information. And when that energy is in the flow of integration, like in the picture, like the river on the slide, we are truly able to perceive and engage with beauty. Now the image shows integration as a river, with one bank being chaos and the other rigidity. And I think that connects with beauty in powerful ways, because as I call to mind the times of chaos in my life, I honestly have to admit, I couldn't connect to beauty, appreciate joy, or creativity in those moments. I was focused on navigating that chaos and returning to integration. And as the chaos began to fade, I could help myself by pausing, breathing, seeking that wakeful rest state, and looking for beauty. Shifting to rigidity, in that state, I was just not open to beauty. I was focused on whatever the object was that rigidity centered around, right? After pausing and breathing and seeking that wakeful rest, beauty can help us return to our integrated state in the flow of our energy and our information. So when we describe that integrated state, what is that? It's being flexible, adaptive, coherent, energized, and stable. So I invite you to bring you to mind a time you felt really integrated. That is a state that I associate with noticing and creating beauty, that we'll have an opportunity to after service. This is where we make art, where we create music, where we write and receive poetry, and on this beautiful river, we have the creative imagination to imagine the future we want to build. Thus, our ability to notice beauty and experience beauty change how we interact with the world. So now I'm going to pivot to why beauty is so important. Karen Walrond, author of the book, The Lightmaker's Manifesto, did a podcast with Brene Brown titled Accessing Joy and Finding Connection in the Midst of Struggle. Like that. It really spoke to me of the grounding, healing nature of beauty, and that's why beauty is so important. Karen and Brene spoke of the vitality of a spiritual practice of noticing beauty and practicing gratitude as how we sustain ourselves. As vital practices for how we build the future we want to create. In this podcast, Brene Brown also openly discussed how she was not okay. She wasn't able to connect to joy or beauty and was experiencing guilt for all the good things in her life. She had lost her integration. And I don't know if anyone else has ever been in that state, but I know I have. And it's beautiful when we know it is okay to not be okay, and then reach out for help. Part of what supports us reaching out when we are not okay is the mutual trust and respect in our covenantal relationships. This gives us the psychological and emotional safety to name that a painful interaction. And they can really hurt, right? Ouch. Those happen to many of us, all of us at some point. The energy in those moments don't just go away. We name them and process them, or they persist. Has anyone else heard the phrase, what we resist persists? Right? I have taken to saying ouch in those moments and working that into my covenants with small groups. I wonder, can we just practice together for a minute? Ready? Ouch.
Ouch.
Right? When we hurt, this beloved community and other healthy relationships can help hold and support us. Other times, the events that throw me into that space are global, and they may seem beyond my reach. That's also where our beloved community can help, because we act for justice in bigger ways together. So in the conversation with Karen, Renee began to return toward integration and realized she had stopped practicing beauty and gratitude. Because, beloveds, here's the hard part. Knowledge of how important beauty and gratitude is, that's wonderful, and it's not enough. We have to do the practice. Self-care is vital, and it has to be routine. Beauty and gratitude have to be a practice in good times and in bad. For me, it resonates with that reading that Angela shared with us. Thank you. The author, Reverend Tanya Yadira Marquez, who uses she/aya pronouns, is an ordained union minister, a spiritual director, and a hospital chaplain. She is influenced by her immigrant and frontera experiences and strongly believes in the healing power of words, movement, community, and ritual. She offered us that conflict can be like one of our sister arts, right? And that makes sense. If we have conflict in love, grounded in curiosity, what if we had conflict with the precise, beautiful words chosen with deep connection that restore and deepen relationship? I think that would be a really beautiful and generative beauty practice. There is a deep beauty in inviting the sister arts into our conversations, especially during conflict, to guide us towards curiosity and choosing those words with intention and compassion. Brene Brown had a Lent practice of taking photographs of something beautiful every day and felt it was life-changing. An American poet, Ross Gay, whose new book came out 3 days ago and is waiting for me when I get home, wrote an essay a day on the delight in every day for a year. And he found it changed how he perceived and interacted with the world. Beauty supports joy and both gives us that integrated strength so we can be resilient in the face of whatever comes. Beauty and joy remind us of our humanity and our interconnection. We can know this, but if we aren't practicing, as Brene found, it doesn't help. It isn't the knowledge that's important, it's the practice, because what wires together. We change our brain. When we activate our default network in response to beauty, I really believe we deepen our experience of that interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And that is beautiful. Beauty is central to Karen Walden's series of podcasts, Own Your Own Beauty, with sub-themes of heartbreak, humor, spirituality, creativity, and adventure. Beauty in all these things is important to remember how lived beauty is in our lives. And in their conversation, Karen Waldron lifted up how there's a natural ebb and flow that lists many examples of the cycles of waxing and waning of the moon to the rising and falling of the tides. The world ebbs and flows, and we are part of nature, not separate. No, that's right. That means we have to ebb and flow too. It feels like a connection in the river of integration and Louis' call from the natural world. When I connect to the wisdom from multiple sources, I really should pay attention, because it may be a more universal concept that applies to a deeper knowledge. How do we ebb and flow? Do we flow into the fight for social justice and flow into the area where we're held and safe and rest? In community, I can flow in while you flow out to rest. And this community knows this. How many of you have been on the board? You have flown in and you have flown out, right? The ability to ebb and flow while being flexible, adaptive, coherent, energized, and stable can sustain our work, relationships, and love. So Karen's practice is to ask 3 questions, and I invite us to share them together. Feel free to either call out answers or reflect on them for yourself. How can I feel healthy? Exercise, singing, music, food. Breathing. I'm sorry, I missed that one. Breathe. How can I feel connected? Here.
By connecting.
By connecting. Friends.
Stay in touch.
Staying in touch. How can I feel purposeful? I'm sorry, did I talk over something? Talking is a wonderful way to be connected. And how can I feel purposeful? Giving. Volunteering. Listening. Intuition. Or was that not what was said? Okay. I wonder if these can guide us to feeling where we are in the ebb and flow of life. Embracing joy and beauty is fuel for our passions, our relationships, and beauty is fuel for how we interact with the world. And so, beloveds, I return to the beginning. Why does beauty matter? Beauty changes us from our neurons to our relationships with the interdependent web. Beauty changes us and calls us into love. Beauty impacts how we interact with the world and how our relationships in the world form us. In good times and bad, beauty and joy and gratitude are spiritual practices that draw us into the flow of integration. And finally, beauty is important for grounding and fueling and building the relationships of the world we want to create together.